Last summer, I went with our three girls to a Taylor Swift concert in Edinburgh. And it felt like half the world did around the world. One of the songs is a song called All Too Well, and there was a 10-minute version of it released when, she's been doing this re-releasing of albums. Could maybe get
to kind of reclaim her music.
Yeah,
almost.
We can maybe come back to that later on. But in this new lengthened version of the song, there's a line, and you were tossing me the car keys, F the patriarchy, at which point everyone
exploded.
Well, everyone sings along, of course, and gives it loudly for F the patriarchy. It is what do you call it in poetry? An enjambment, isn't it? Where a line you get the end of a line, but it actually carries on to the next line. But it kind of you have this pause, and then it continues, and that is it's a keychain that had F the patriarchy on it that has been tossed aside by her beau that she's writing about in the song. So
he doesn't like that.
No, I think it was his keychain.
Oh, right.
But so I think it's Jake Gyllenhaal. This song is written about, right? So as an older man who has the label of wanting to be seen as a feminist, but he throws his car keys like at her feet with the F the patriarchy on the keychain. So it's her kind of dig at those who would pretend to
not like the patriarchy by benefiting from, but still benefiting from it. Yes, by taking possibly advantage of someone who was younger and more naive and okay.
Because the original song was written quite a long time ago, 10, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. Anyway, our topic for today, patriarchy.
Lots to talk about.
Okay, so we're our next kind of chapter in our We Look at Christian Nationalism, and a big topic within Christian nationalism and the rest of the world is the sense of a kind of societal order, I guess, and patriarchy in particular. Patriarchy just meaning men are in control.
Which is...
as opposed to a matriarchy.
And there haven't been too many of those, have there?
If any, in history. I mean, there are some tribes, aren't they? The Hopi tribe, I think, kind of operates as
mythological Amazons, but...
yeah, but in real life...
I mean, I think there are some possibly kind of indigenous groups that have had...
the Hopi, that's what I was thinking of.
More matriarchal societies, which haven't completely stripped by the environment and things.
Indeed. So, last week I was talking a little bit about the book I've been reading, now finished, which is the book Taking America Back for God, the Whitehead Perry book. And so last week I was just talking about some things that maybe give me a little bit of hope, was that where you've got certain issues, say an issue of immigration, or kind of, refugees, asylum seekers, something like that, where the kind of Christian nationalism scale, the higher you are on the Christian nationalism, the more likely you are to push back or have a really hard line against asylum seekers or refugees. With if you kind of, level everything else out, account for everything else, then Christian practice or religious practice, the higher you are with religious practice, you would tend to be more sympathetic, open and sympathetic to refugees and asylum seekers.
Yeah, you would hope that would be the way it would be.
Indeed. And that covers over a number of different topics, so kind of race relations as well. There's a bit in that. But Where it doesn't is where
patriarchy.
It comes to issues around kind of patriarchy order. So, and that's so the role of men and women within that, but also homosexuality, those kind of issues, how folks see divorce, all that sort of thing. Then it tracks almost exactly with.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So if you're high Christian nationalism, high and with your religious practice, it just they track the same way on these things. So that's where there's a difference.
Yes, well, I mean, Christian nationalism is always going to be about straight white men being in power. I think that's just a given, and that certainly is the way I grew up. I don't know that we would have self-labeled as patriarchal. But we certainly weren't egalitarian. So in the circles I grew up in, it would be a softer sounding complementarianism is how you would see male-female roles, is that they complement each other, they're not the same. It's essentially just patriarchy wrapped up a little bit more palatably for the modern world, I think, because there really isn't. It's still men in charge of churches, men in charge of families, men in charge of women, men in charge of children, right? But we use a slightly easier on the ears term for that. And we would have pushed back against egalitarianism, right? I think I mentioned that in our first conversation, is in that late night camp conversation about the roles of men and women, where you were advocating for egalitarianism, right? And my immediate reaction was, oh no, he's wrong about that. I need to fix him, right? We see how well that worked out.
Yeah, well, there you go. The patriarchy won out
yeah,
in our own particular instance.
Ironically, isn't it? That's quite funny, isn't it? Although, to be fair, you didn't really try to do any convincing, right? I just went and did my research for myself and realized, what I was taught wasn't what the Bible actually says. But certainly I was raised in a family and my dad is really loving and kind and a gentle person, which is why I think I didn't have any really negative associations with this kind of way of living, because my parents are lovely people and they have a really lovely relationship and they loved us as kids. But I know that is not the experience of everyone who's raised in kind of patriarchal systems.
And that's where you've got a kind of high gradient power dynamic. Then the ability for abuse to become a part of that pattern is so much easier.
Absolutely. And I think it needs to be said that patriarchal systems where there is this God-given authority to men, you're going to attract men who want to have authority over other people and don't want to be questioned. So my dad's, I don't think that kind of person, but that you're going to attract those kind of people. And you see it in the Southern Baptist Convention, where, it's very patriarchal. Women are not allowed. I think Rick Warren's church was kicked out over ordaining women to leadership. And they have a really very widespread problem with abuse of girls and women in that church. And there was a pattern of covering it up and maybe moving the abuser on, but there was no accountability, which is one of the problems with these systems of authority, authority you're not allowed to question because it's God ordained, right? Lots of dangers there.
So that is where you've got this kind of, the sort of traditional values or traditional understanding of society being linked to a biblical so I guess this is where in Christian nationalism you have the kind of philosophy of patriarchy, and then how it defends itself, how it wraps itself up with kind of understanding, and then is deploying biblical values within it, or biblical language, and certainly, you know, the context in which much of the Bible would have been written was patriarchal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, I mean, I just think like biblical marriage is just a bit silly, isn't it? Because, I mean, there was polygamy, we were taking concubines, we were having multiple wives, we were like, I mean,
just
it really...
read a bit of the story of King David.
Yeah, I mean, it was really pretty awful stuff, and it certainly wasn't monogamous relationships, not by a long shot. And they're presented as, I mean, you know, when David was... I think castigated by Nathaniel for taking Bathsheba. It was really about, he took the property of another man. It wasn't really about the sanctity of Bathsheba's own agency and her own, right? It was about, he took the property of another man. And I think Nathan actually says, you know, if you just asked, I'd have given you other wives. Right? You didn't have to take someone else's wife. I'd have given you more. So there isn't this feeling in the Bible of one man and one woman. Not at all. It's women were the property of men. Men could have as many as they could afford, right? You just couldn't take someone else's. It's not about faithfulness to your wife. It's about not infringing on another man's property, right? So... yeah, I mean, this kind of biblical values, biblical marriage, it's all very cherry-picked.
Yeah, because these, I mean, the stories that we have, the documentation that we have, especially from we can come on to the New Testament, because that's where things do change a bit. But within the Old Testament, you're covering centuries and centuries of time span. And so there are changes that are going on in dynamics that are happening between relationships, and you see a bit of that development that's going on as bringing in the laws that are about treatment of widows and orphans and things like that, of kind of protections that come in within the society for trying to help the society, but it's a kind of slow development that you're seeing.
I mean, and you do see, I mean, there are definitely glimmers of hope in the Old Testament even. So you'd have Deborah, who was a prophetess, and Esther, who is kind of celebrated for rescuing her people. So, I mean, you know, you have these instances of strong female characters, strong female leaders. I mean, you even have, I mean, I remember... we talked a little bit about how excited I was to share my newfound knowledge of the Bible not restricting women with my family, and how that didn't really go over that well. But I remember one larger family conversation about it. And of course, there is so much that's patriarchal in the Bible. But then there's also stuff that isn't patriarchal. And I do remember saying, so of course, in Genesis, women are called I'll make a helpmeet for Adam. Eve was going to be a helpmeet for Adam. And of course, in patriarchal or complementarian circles, right, this is clear sign of a women's not lesser role, but a different role. Like, so they wouldn't say it's lesser, even though you're under authority, they would insist that doesn't mean you're lesser than, you just have a different role. But so you have a different role, you're to help, you're not to lead. But of course, the actual word that's used in the original for helpmeet, is only used a few times, and it's used of Eve in relation to Adam, but then it's kind of used of God in relation to us. So it clearly doesn't denote someone who's inferior in authority. So there are these, I mean, the Bible is a really complicated document that has a lot of different perspectives in it.
Now, when you, one of the things that strikes me about this kind of complementarian model of things, and certainly when we were, I guess, before we got married, there was a lot of talk about
it. Yeah. And then even afterwards. Right. Because one of my aunts was really feeling called to go into the ministry, but part of the conservative evangelical church, the church that she was in, didn't at that time ordain women, which I think was part of the impetus for that big conversation where we ended up with the family, where we talked about the meaning of the word helpmeet and all of that, because my aunt was quite interested in what the Bible was, because she was starting to explore all of that for herself. And she did end up becoming a teaching pastor at her church. But yes, the whole complementarian idea is. So
you kind of beat me to it there.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's about it's a group categorization. So
what do you mean by that?
So what I mean is that men and women have different spheres.
Yes, absolutely.
So I could kind of understand complementarianism if it was about individuals. So within a relationship, you have different things that you're good at, and so you find that way.
I save money, you spend money.
Perfect, exactly.
I try to claw you back.
That is exactly right. So we complement each other perfectly there. But you know what I mean. There is this.
People have different strengths, and then we should play to our strengths, and then let other people play to their strengths.
But that's not when folks are talking about complementarian. That is not what they mean. It just means because of who you were born as, you are clearly not able to operate in this sphere of.
Well, not necessarily that you're not able to. It's just you're not. God says you're not supposed to.
Yes.
Right? God says you're not supposed to.
But I assume that is because the thinking would be you don't have the capability to do it, because
I don't know that. I don't know. In some places,
I don't think it's true.
No, I know, but I don't feel like I was raised like that. I don't feel like I was raised with the idea that you're not to lead in the home, or you're not to be right because you're not able to. It's just your role, right? Like, because my parents.
So I wonder if that is particular to because of the situation.
Yeah, my mom is very savvy and a very good judge of character and very good businesswoman and my dad is lovely man, sees the best in everybody. Not necessarily always, I think, sees what's happening with. I think my mom's a better judge of character than my dad. I think, but so I guess I saw this relationship where they both have strengths, really lovely strengths, and in some ways, I saw my mom as being more able in a lot of ways. But yet the God-given role is my mom has to submit to my dad. And it works for them. They have a lovely relationship. They always have, I had a very loving childhood. So maybe that was just my experience. I didn't experience it as women aren't capable of leading. So I almost experienced it as it's, submitting to your husband is part of your submission to God, even if you have better ideas than your husband, right? Your role would be to support him and to talk him through things and to maybe bring him around, right? But then if he decides something different, even if you're right, you submit. And I think possibly it works for my parents because I think my dad listens to my mom and they,
Yeah.
They make good decisions together. I don't.
They've been able to make it work.
They have, yeah. Mm-hmm. And some people do, but I.
But is it the kind of the best way of things being?
No, I don't think it is.
But it is. It certainly within sort of Christian nationalism, kind of that understanding. The family units and it's not even the wider family, is it really?
Immediate family.
Family unit is set up as being the gold standard. This is what God wants for humanity, and this is who's in control. The father is the head of the household.
And the kind of Christian nationalism that's really coming to the fore now with the likes of Doug Wilson is much more extreme than what I grew up with and what you would recognize in conservative evangelicals here in the UK. It is a much more extreme understanding of the Bible and wanting to go back to a lot of Old Testament structures, and seeing women as really needing to be under the control of a man. So like we talked about last week, I think daughters should be under the control of their authority of their father until they get married. And there wasn't any sense of that for me growing up. And I suspect, like, if you spoke to conservative evangelicals over here, you wouldn't have that sense. That wouldn't be part of their experience. There is this very extreme version of fundamentalist Christianity that I think goes along with the Christian nationalism of the kind that is really is at full prominence in the States at the moment. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So yeah. I think there certainly is a difference between what I see in the Christian nationalist movement in the States right now and how I was raised.
So it would have been in the 90s into the 2000s, right? There was I'm going to get this wrong, Promise Keepers, a movement,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
so
and I remember
I keep thinking of Oath Keepers, but that's a maybe connected, a slightly different thing, which is proper
Trump,
white supremacist
the Trump group that he told to stand back and stand by, right?
But the Promise Keepers was a movement, but it is
one of my
undoubtedly
uncles
coming from a patriarchal.
One of my uncles, I remember him attending.
Yeah. So it was really about men reclaiming their role,
authority over women.
Yeah,
but it's always phrased,
but in a loving way.
It's servant leadership, right? Mm-hmm. There are all these nice words you can use to dress it up, I think. And to be honest, again, I grew up in a family where I think it was lived out in a pretty as healthy a way as that can be lived out. But I just think that it is an ideology. Well, I think anytime you give one adult unquestioning authority over another adult they're in a romantic relationship with, that's not a good thing. There isn't, we've never... We make decisions together, and that hasn't been a problem. As long as there's kind of love and understanding of the other person and a willingness to compromise and a willingness to listen, two adults can make decisions together. That's not a controversial statement, but Christian nationalism and kind of the patriarchal view sees that as a controversial statement. They see that as someone has to be the authority and it has to be the man. And once you put that kind of structure in place, then you bring in all of these unnecessary problems that are always associated with power dynamics. Whenever you have unaccountable power, there's always the potential and a fairly, a reasonable potential for abuse. Mm-hmm. And it's going to attract the wrong kind of people, which is going to up the chances of abuse, right? Whereas if you have structures that are spreading power and making people accountable to each other and encouraging respectful conversation and care for each other, and the idea that you find in the Bible of mutual submission, right? That's in the Ephesians passage that tells wives to submit to your husbands. It actually comes right after a passage that says, Christians, submit to one another as in the Lord, and then wives to your husbands. And the submit isn't in that. It doesn't say wives submit to your husbands. It's pulled in from the idea of mutual submission. So this idea of loving each other and prioritizing others, right? And if everyone is doing that, then you can create a really lovely community without the dangers of institutionalized power, which is what Christian patriarchy wants to do.
There's if you look in the Mark chapter 10, there's that chapter is kind of full of so Jesus with a group of folks that he's talking to, followers that he's talking to. There's a number of different encounters in that chapter, which kind of talking about. So there's a bit about divorce that's in there, where folks are. So, I mean, divorce at the time, it's going back to Deuteronomy, isn't it? I can't remember the chapter 44 or something like that. There's the kind of the rules around divorce, and there's a verse in there about the husband, if they find reason, they can write a note divorcing their wife.
You go.
So you've got that rule, but then there's all these layers then of understand. Well, what would be the reason?
Yeah, things build up over centuries. Excuses for husbands to divorce their wives, and wives didn't have a reciprocal ability, did they? They were.
So. So Jesus has asked this question about when is it okay, because there were different understandings at the time, kind of different schools of thought about what was appropriate. So some it would need to be like adultery had taken place, whereas others it could just be you hadn't done the washing up or whatever it would be, and so Jesus kind of it pushes it back and turns it around to think about the relationships between them and the kind of mutuality that there should be between, and talks about how two become one. So the two flesh become one flesh. Again, it's all this sort of language about the kind of unified bond of folks turning into something new. And then later in that same chapter, he is... well, there's a couple of bits. There's the whole part where the children are brought to Jesus, and in that the disciples trying to keep the hierarchy of control, do not want the children to come to Jesus because Jesus is the rabbi. He's kind of at the top, and they're protecting his status there, and Jesus tells them to bog off because they are absolutely got this wrong, and he invites the children in, takes them into his arms and says these children are the center of everything I'm talking about. So the lowliest are the center of everything, and we're here to serve the children, not the other way around. And then the third thing, sorry, this was just going.
That's okay.
The third thing in that chapter is that I think it's Peter. I think is talking about kind of why are we doing all this? We've given up everything to follow. Peter had given up his business and all that to follow Jesus. We've given up everything. What kind of what's in it for us, sort of thing, is what he's asking Jesus. And then and Jesus talks about you've given up your house, your belongings, your mother, your father, children. You've given up all these things to follow me. And then says, but you will find other things. You will find other children and mothers, and property and blessings that will come. And what's really noticeable in that list is that although he mentions fathers as something you've given up, he doesn't mention it but you will find other things to bring up later. Completely misses father out of the list. It's like a mirror image between them, only that is gone in what Jesus is saying.
So what do you think that
means?
What is that?
To my mind, it's entirely deliberate, and Jesus is talking about a new community in which only God is the one that is in that kind of authority figure, and everyone else. So when you come into this new community, the kingdom of God, we are all in this together. So the kind of modeling of relationships that you see in a brother and sister, in a mother and child, this kind of there's
reciprocal
care for
things,
each other, reciprocal. That is what should be being modeled, not this hierarchical model of the Father, because that is left to God.
Well, and that's what you see in Paul as well. I mean, there are passages, Paul or kind of pseudo-Paul, that are used to restrict women in the church. But of course, when
you're talking about pseudo-Paul, you're just referring to, so there are letters that we are 99.9% sure were written by the Apostle Paul. But then there were others that were like from the school of, or from followers of Paul.
Which was a recognized historical thing to do, is to write in the name of the person who inspired you. So it's not...
but you see a degradation in the kind of message for this new church of equality that was initially in the letters written by Paul.
Yeah, and you can see the kind of power structures wanting to reassert themselves. No, what I was thinking about is in the passage in Ephesians that talks about the mutual submission of Christians to each other, and then wives to husbands, and it's what that is actually an ancient Roman type of writing called a household code, which were very common. You would have these household codes which would be telling households how they should structure themselves, and they were always patriarchal. It was always the father husband at the top, and he was in charge of everyone else in the family, and everyone else had to obey him. And Paul takes that recognized structure and flips it onto its head, and he subverts it, just the way Jesus was doing with all of his subversion of recognized authority structures and leveling the playing field. And you see that, and these household codes would have definitely told the husband to have authority over the wife. And the wives were told to obey their husbands, whereas in Paul's, yes, women are to submit. I mean, he had to be careful not to get too far out of the accepted structures of the day, because if you really are undermining the accepted structures of society, you're putting your whole group at risk. But he's subverting it, right? The submission of wives is part of the mutual submission of believers. And husbands are not told to have authority over their wives. They're told to be servant leaders. This is where the servant leader comes from. And it sounds odd to our egalitarian mind, but actually at the time, he was really subverting the accepted power structures in a way that made it safer for him to do so. Did the same thing with slaves and masters, right? I mean, slaves were still to obey their masters as the Lord, but the masters were not really, weren't to have it's not this authority. It's recognizing that your slaves are your brothers and sisters in Christ. And so there's this subversion of what was expected in that society, the subversion of the authority that was expected in that society.
Of course, and Paul's following Jesus in this, and Jesus was clearly doing the same thing within the confines of it. It would have been impossible for one person, even Jesus, to completely overturn patriarchy.
Oh yeah, I mean,
this is
centuries of
thousands of years here of built up understanding and of people just buying into this kind of system, whether they wanted to or not. They kind of had to, because it's just the way society worked. But Jesus, he obviously had women followers and
in fact they seem to be kind of bankrolling him, right? Isn't that the kind of thinking that they were contributing to
well, I mean, honestly, I think in many ways they were just equals to the others. I mean, a couple of things. The word that we use for disciple is a male word, so the language wasn't even there to describe a female who was in the role of Peter, James, John, whatever the disciples. Yeah. So, but Mary Magdalene, there's the other Mary of the mother of James and Joseph, and then there was Salome. These were clearly they're mentioned a number of times, like you have Peter, James, and John are mentioned as close male disciples.
Well,
you feel like there's something very similar that is going on.
Well, there's certain.
Here.
I mean, there's a gospel of Mary Magdalene, isn't there? I think there is, and of course, she has been, as the follower, she has been conflated with the kind of prostitute who
in Luke's gospel,
right?
Yeah.
Who kind of, but I think that this gospel suggests that was not her role. She was right. She was a very strong supporter, follower of Jesus. She had authority in the early church, but of course, the gospel talking about her didn't make it into the canon by the time you were taught. So you can see these authority structures dampening down.
Yeah.
Possibly what was going on in the early church.
And in Mary Magdalene's case, it is, I mean, you really see it between the West and the East, because in the Western church, that whole conflation of Mary Magdalene, seeing her as a prostitute, happened over 1,000 years later. I think it was like 12th century or something like that kind of came about. It never happened in the Eastern church.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they have always seen Mary as a kind of saintly figure, as somebody who gave up, who was healed by Jesus from the kind of demons that she had within her, and then committed herself to Jesus and so very different to the understanding that we've kind of maybe grown up with in the West, this kind of nagging away that this was a fallen woman in some way, but that's not the case at all.
They always like to denigrate women by calling their personal morality into question.
Yeah, and you have the case of Junia in Romans,
an apostle.
where Paul says, to the apostle who's one of the great disciples, and and there again there was a few writers who are, as they're copying out the letter, who are like, oh, that can't be right,
and just changed
it to a male name.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
That sort of thing going on. Mm-hmm. So it feels very much like that Jesus was, in his way, also creating a community that was radically egalitarian for that time.
Oh my goodness! And you think first century?
Well, you think of we like, if you're watching a movie of Jesus' life and you see Jesus and this crowd of folks kind of following him as he's moving from place to place. I mean, the idea of a group of women who may have been on their own, sleeping with a group of men out and about. I mean, this is it would blow your mind.
Not at all part of that society.
Completely beyond what would be the
acceptable
norms of the day.
Structures, yeah.
And yet that was part of the community that Jesus was building and asking people to that was what they were modeling. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, from Jesus' perspective, that echoes with what you were saying about Paul is what were the kind of limits that Jesus himself imposed on what he was doing. So would it have been? You mean? Well, yeah. So I'm thinking about, and partly because it's one of the stories talking about this on Sunday, is when Jesus sends out the 70, mm-hmm. and you've got now. Sorry, not if it's all. I mean, there could be that there were couples that went out. So, a man and his male and female, man and wife, would go out as one of the couples that would go out in that. But would it have been a step too far for Jesus to send out
single women?
Or even a couple of women, as you would have had others. Folks wouldn't have listened.
Yes, I wouldn't have imagined.
It wouldn't have had the effect that it needed to have for that kind of mission out to the kind of outreach to others and to spread the message. So there's that kind of drawing into the community, and then folks see it being modeled within the community, mm-hmm. and then people are drawn into a different understanding of the way things need to work there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think Jesus was always about subverting all power structures. It wasn't, I mean, the male-female one is a huge one, and it's been hugely consequential throughout history. But he was all, you know, if you look at the Beatitudes, it's all about, you know, the first shall be last, and all about elevating those who mourn and those who, you know, who are poor and those who are weak. And it's always, he was always about the least of these, which I guess is just one of the reasons, and I'll come back to what I said last week or the week before, that the whole Christian nationalism thing just makes me so sad. Because I remember when I did all of that research to prove you wrong and ended up realizing that this kind of very hierarchical view of the Bible wasn't what the Bible was actually saying. And I was so excited by it. And when I actually looked at how Jesus really subverted these power structures in aid of empowering women in the first century context, that's quite an amazing thing. It's just so beautiful what Jesus was doing. And then we have Christian nationalism, and the form that it's taking now is wanting to take us all the way back to the Old Testament with some really very, very harsh understandings of what men who are in power can do to those who are underneath them in power. And then they're trying to do it in Jesus' name. I just find it so sad, you know? When I think about the kind of excitement I had when I realized what Jesus was really about.
The gospel is good news.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be good news of freedom.
And love and community and raising each other up, and not instituting power structures that hold people down, which is...
Yeah, I find it so hard to
wrap your head around.
Yeah, well, it's the contortions that you need to go through in reading Jesus and what he was saying, what he was doing, and I think, I mean, that's partly why then Jesus just becomes a
figurehead.
Like a tool.
Yeah.
He's just there to do some kind of transaction, some kind of deal in order to satisfy the authority and power structures within to
legitimate them, right?
Yeah.
He's there to legitimate these power structures.
That is just
so ironic,
isn't it? To completely ignore everything that he was saying and doing, and the countercultural elements to that confronted the patriarchy.
No, it reminds me of that scene in one of the Jesus films. That's the one where I think Jeremy Sisko is playing Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane with the devil who's tempting him to not go through with the cross, and the devil is just showing him all of the damage that's going to be done in his name. You know?
This is the devil that is dressed up in an Armani suit.
Yes, very suave.
Very suave.
Mm-hmm. Right? And you just think, gosh, and that has happened. And it just, which I guess is one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is just to be a part of the voices that are trying to push back and talking a little bit about our own experiences as a way of pushing back at very small way.
Yeah, it's part of why it's that, what kind of world are we about? And for us, what Jesus talked about, how he lived his life, that the kind of modeling that community was, and the
prioritizing the least of these, and then subverting power structures and creating communities that love and support, and where these power structures are almost irrelevant because everyone is loving and accepting and wanting the best for each other. That's the kind of world you want to create instead of the one that we seem to be pushing towards, certainly in the States at the moment.
Well, I mean, it's happening here in the United Kingdom too. When we think about some of the language that's been used against minority groups, and so, I mean, we're talking about patriarchy and talked a lot about gender here, and which is like the biggest part of what patriarchy is about. But it then kind of spills over because it is this white male kind of is the
straight male.
Straight, yes.
Right, because I mean.
Yeah, heterosexual, cisgender.
Yes. And homosexuality cuts against, doesn't it, the kind of power structures, these kind of male-dominated power structures. So it's taboo.
Yeah, well, literally taboo in that within that patriarchal mindset, you're confusing roles. Yeah. You're getting things mixed up, and so rather than welcoming the diversity of different options, it's like, my brain can't cope with this. I can only cope with one thing, and failure to compute. So minority groups are at risk within a patriarchal structure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So within what's going on in the United States at the moment, particularly with Trump he is trying to put himself, quite successfully, it has to be said, in the ultimate patriarch role. So he is the daddy, and that it's awful, isn't it? But that's what he wants to be.
Well, and there was that really cringy Tucker Carlson speech talking about before the election, right? Just before the election, talking about daddy's going to come back and he's going to spank you for being bad, right? Like it was very deeply uncomfortable to listen to.
You feel like a counselor should be involved.
Oh, it was, it was very, very odd. But the crowd responded really positively to that.
Yeah. So he's putting himself, Trump is putting himself into, and this is always the case in these kind of strongman kind of situations of I'm the ultimate authority. I can do no wrong. I have I'm the only one that can make the decisions that are going to improve things for the lives of others, and so we're in that setting at the moment where that is what is going on. That is the position that we're in, and unless there is a kind of powerful alternative message to that, and that's where it feels like the kind of
Democrats are falling down on the job,
or anyone who's wanting to kind of push back against this retreat to a patriarchal strongman who. I mean, in that we referenced it last week, the cabinet meeting that Trump had, where he was talking absolutely in terms of I am this final word in everything, and that is where the Supreme Court in the United States is pushing things to this unified executive, that it's just one person has the ultimate control over everything.
So crazily dangerous.
It is chilling. Even if that is in the hands of somebody who's trying to do
benevolent.
The right thing,
I know.
There's no way they can do it.
No,
it's impossible. You have to rely on other people. And of course, that is what is happening with Trump. He's relying on other people, but all those groups that you've got around him are all buying into this same kind of patriarchal narrative. So what is the alternative? So we've talked about this, a kind of equal society, a society where folks see the benefit in serving one another, in trying to. So I mean, that's the whole basis of a kind of tax structure is a structure in which we all contribute something into society, and that helps to make things. It raises the tide for everyone, but that is absolutely not where folks are driving at the moment. There's all we don't want to pay taxes. We don't want to contribute to anything that is seen as for society, because that might help somebody else. And I guess it's it's the zero-sum mentality. It's this, and this is going back to biblical terminology of a limited goods society where there's only so much good in the world, and so you're fighting over
gets
it.
More, you get less.
You lose out, and of course that isn't the way things work.
It shouldn't be.
Wealth in a society can just go up as it becomes more productive.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, at the moment, we've got this situation where your vast majority of wealth is going to a tiny percentage of the population. Yep. I think you're trying to ask, like, what is our alternative vision, and how do we articulate that in a compelling way? But that's really, really difficult because, and it goes back to what we were talking about Haidt's, kind of moral bases, that this group mentality and the hierarchy and authority figures and purity, those are really simple and really easy to understand. And those are the kind of messages that Trump and Christian nationalism are using to consolidate their power. Whereas as liberals, we are wanting to make sure that people aren't harmed, and we're wanting there to be equity for everybody. And that the message just isn't as resonant with as many people, I don't think. And I don't have the answer to that. I really hope somebody in power figures it out.
Well, Jesus had the answer to it, and he was crucified for it. Right? I mean, ultimately, that's what happened. He tried to model things. He tried to show people a different way of doing it, and the authority
figures, no, thank you.
Killed him.
In fact, a little bit stronger than no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't, and it's really funny because we did actually, and if you read Heather Cox Richardson, who is great, by the way, if you haven't, she's a historian in the States, and she writes daily letters to Americans, which you can subscribe to free through her Substack.
You don't have to be an American to read it.
You don't. She's great, but she really talks about how in the wake of the Great Depression, with FDR coming in and establishing the New Deal, we really had this consensus as a society that government was there to create structures that worked for everybody. So we were there as a society. But then you have had, since the 30s and the implementation of the New Deal under FDR, you have had these businessmen who don't want that. And they have been consistently working to undermine. And here, almost 100 years later, we are seeing, they've been playing a really, really long game. And the whole idea of the patriarchal family and family values, it's all been linked in together as a way of hiving people off from this great consensus that Heather Cox Richardson talks about, of creating a society that works for everybody, creating, a more equitable distribution of wealth, strong middle classes, not letting people just sink or swim, right? So we did have it at one point, and we've lost it over the course of decades. So I guess the question is, how do we get it back? Is it going to take something like a Great Depression? And it's after the Second World War here in the United States. It was after the Second World War. After these catastrophes.
These absolute catastrophes. That's when the National Health Service was founded. And the Labour kind of movement had this kind of uptick and was able to do quite a lot within society. Fundamentally, I think it comes down to selfishness, doesn't it? So when things are generally stable and good, people just want more and more for themselves. Yeah. And it's only when confronted with absolute horror and catastrophe that folks can it's like in the pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, when we were all out cheering for the NHS staff, the National Health Service staff, all across the country, people were out there, Thursday night,
I think so.
Thursday night or something like that, to clap and applaud for those who were working and putting their lives on the line in hospitals and care homes and all the rest. Move on a couple of years, everyone's, I mean, you're wanting to take away pay, you're not paying enough. I mean, that was just in that brief moment.
Castigating junior doctors for wanting to earn more than the barista at the, right? Like after 6 years of study and having people's lives in their hands. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? What we pay them.
Yeah, so.
Or don't pay them.
Folks can be quite short-term memory and yes, when you're in a time of crisis, that's when you see the benefit of everyone pulling together. But as soon as you're past that, there's that kind of movement on. And I mean, in part, my role as a minister in the church is trying to remind people of what it is to live in community, what the gospel is about, what the kingdom of God is about. It's about a community where we try to live together, gently with the environment around us and thinking about that. But it sometimes feels like it is a
uphill battle.
Yeah, it really
uphill slog.
It's a struggle. Well, that's a bit. Patriarchy.
Of our thoughts on patriarchy.
Yeah, patriarchy is a big topic. Ultimately, though, what Jesus was doing was pushing back against it, and that is something that.
And so, as followers of Jesus, is something we would want to push back against as well.
Yeah. And patriarchy is absolutely entwined with Christian nationalism. Yeah. The sense of creating a power structure, ultimately with just a few with power.
Yep.
Okay, enough on that.
I think so. Okay, well, talking about long, hard slogs. I'm going to be climbing a couple of Monroes this weekend with our son.
Okay, a Monroe is?
A Monroe is one of the 282 Scottish mountains that are over,
3,000 feet, isn't it?
Something like that. 900 something meters. Mm-hmm. Luckily, most of them you start at you're not starting at sea level, so you're not actually attaining all of that altitude. Some more than others. But Andrew's been wanted to do them over the summer, and then somehow the summer just got away from us. So we're gonna set out early tomorrow and do the Cairnwell and possibly Ben McDewey. We'll see how my legs are feeling. You can do a loop. If we get up to the Cairngorm, which I think is not too bad, and I just think I really can't do it at all, I might suggest that we
Are you taking the dogs?
Abort. Do you know what? I'm not. I had a look, and it goes near cliffs, and I don't trust Layla at all, and that would just be way too stressy. So we are not taking the dogs. But we're going to go get some exercise. I went and
very good.
Bought some treats to take up with us. Gonna leave early, so we finish before it gets dark. And then I am not looking forward to the old lady aches and pains of Sunday and probably into next week. But hey, it'll be a good experience. I do like climbing them. I wish we'd had a chance to get a few done this summer, but
I remember that when we were on holiday down in Fife, was it?
Yes, and we did Ben Hornsey.
And we did it right at the start of the holiday.
Yes.
And then I couldn't walk for the rest of the holiday. I was in pain
agony,
for the rest of the holiday.
So you're not coming with us, I imagine.
Alas, too many other things to do.
And you're so sad about that.
I will be thinking about you. Is the weather pretty grey at the moment?
Well, when I had checked, it was supposed to be clear. I think it possibly rain on Sunday, but there wasn't any rain forecast for tomorrow. I will check again. I don't actually want to do it if visibility has to be good. I'm not. I am a good weather climber. I am not a tricky weather climber. So I will double check, but that's the plan.
That'll be good. Yeah, So a lot of the Munros, they can be long, but they're not a hugely arduous climb. But if the weather changes, even in the areas where people can get into real bother. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful.
Yes, which is why I only go in good weather. I don't. Yeah. I don't trust myself enough to go in tricky weather. Anyway, so
that'll be good. Pictures next week?
Possibly.
We'll see.
See what the view is. It's a little bit sad. Sometimes you get up to the top. I have gotten up to the top of Munros and it has just been pouring with rain. Some of the easier ones. Yeah. And you don't have much of a view. It's much nicer if you at least get a view at the top.
You climb to be inside a cloud.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens. We live in Scotland.
Indeed. All right. So one of the things that tickled me this week was that our very own Nigel Farage.
Oh, do you have to say our very own?
He is an MP in the United Kingdom for the British government.
Sadly.
British Parliament, rather. Was over in the United States to give evidence to Congress.
To lie.
About freedom.
Of speech.
Freedom of speech was the kind of the gist of it. And so if you don't know who Nigel Farage is, he is
Count yourself lucky.
Indeed. But he owns the Reform Party, because it is not a proper party.
No, it's a corporation.
It's a business that he owns. And he is now an MP after, I think, 7 or 8 attempts of becoming an MP. He is now an MP.
So depressing.
And his party would certainly have similarities with the movement towards Christian nationalism in the UK and the US. So he frequently tries to ingratiate himself with Trump. Rather amusingly, he went over to America for the inauguration, but didn't get an invite, so he had to watch it from his hotel.
Yeah.
It's pathetic, to be honest with you, but he
still is a Trump wannabe, because Reform has won, quite a few councils, and then they immediately go in and try to do this anti-DEI stuff, even though we don't have DEI over here. It's not called.
No. Well, it's EDI.
It's not called
it's the same thing.
DEI, and then talking about, all the rhetoric against immigration, and it's all just Trump wannabe stuff. And
it is.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the hearing, after the what's the name of the guy that's the chair of the committee?
Jamie Raskin?
No, he's the ranking member. It's the
minority member.
It was the guy who used to be a coach and
Jim Jordan.
Jim Jordan turned a blind eye to the abuse that was going on by the
wrestling
in the wrestling. Yeah, exactly.
Nasty piece of work.
Absolutely. But Jamie Raskin, Democratic congressman, was on fire. So here's a little. Oh, it's only a little snippet.
Worth a watch,
but it's quite amusing.
The dictators of the world have got nothing to fear from this hearing. The Republicans called it to attack our democratic allies in Europe. The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right, pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime, while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most. Well, this hearing mimics Vice President J.D. Vance, who went to the Munich Security Conference in February. In the first 2 minutes of his speech, whitewashed the world's leading autocratic regimes, proclaiming that the threat that worries him is not Russia. It's not China, he said, but rather it's our European allies. Amazing. Republicans are promoting far-right parties in Europe, like Alternative for Deutschland, Reform UK, and Rassemblement National Français, and ignoring massive repression in Russia, China, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and among all the autocrats of the world. Republicans are vilifying European liberal democracies simply for engaging in the kind of line-drawing exercises that we Americans engage in under our First Amendment with respect to the epidemic of child pornography, protecting children from other harmful content, defamatory speech, online scams and false advertising, and speech inciting riots and imminent lawless action. All forms of speech that the First Amendment does not protect and whose tricky contours must still be drawn by law. We could have a meaningful hearing on this complicated subject, but this hearing is just a drive-by hit against a strong Democratic ally to benefit a Donald Trump sycophant and wannabe. But it's even worse than this. Not only are our colleagues ignoring intensifying repression in the world's dictatorships, they're also trying to distract the world from the attack on freedom taking place right here in America every single day. Americans aren't worried about the EU or the Online Safety Act in the UK. We're not worried about white nationalists not having enough license to incite lynch mobs to set immigrants on fire in their bedrooms. Americans are worried that Donald Trump is working to rewrite and whitewash American history in our museums, our textbooks, and our national parks, to destroy PBS, NPR, and public broadcasting, to ban books in our libraries, and to censor any news stories critical of him by installing political henchmen in private broadcast rooms. Americans know that academic freedom is in danger when the administration cancels and withholds billions of dollars in scientific and medical research funding from American universities, even for urgent life-saving studies about breast cancer or heart attacks, as a way to force schools to impose government orthodoxy on curriculum, hiring, admissions, and any student and faculty speech that MAGA considers politically incorrect.
Oh, well, if we stop there, it's worth going to watch the whole of this. I'll put a link to one of the things into the description and on the YouTube. Ostensibly, the reason Nigel Farage went over there, I don't know if you saw any of the images.
I didn't,
but
no.
he was wearing his GB News pin on his suit. Now, he's an MP, a member of Parliament, but he still has a side gig with a show on GB News, which is a right-wing propaganda outfit, really.
Kind of pushing kind of towards Fox News kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of conspiracy theory kind of stuff. So he has his own show on that. Mm-hmm. So he was there as an MP or as an employee of this?
Knows?
It's bizarre.
Who even knows?
But in what Jamie Raskin was saying there, which could easily kind of slip through as a comment about people in hotels with fire in hotels. Now that's because Lucy Connolly. Yeah, so this was somebody who has been the government, the authority that has been for inciting violence,
and she pled guilty.
Yeah.
Because she did incite violence.
And that violence was about lighting fires around hotels where immigrants are being housed. Mm-hmm. So that, he was there to lay out the case that was a repression of free speech. It's absurd. It's utterly absurd. And as Jamie Raskin is saying, even in the States where free speech is the First Amendment, there are certain aspects of free speech where there are controls over it.
You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater, right? Yeah. Things like that are dangerous speech.
Could cause harm to others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question that's kind of rattling around it feels like what Farage was doing. There's been some talk about this. Was it treasonous? In that he's a member of the British Parliament going over to another government, another body, parliamentary body. Parliament is not the right word to use in the United States, but Congress, congressional body, in order to slate his own country.
And wasn't he advocating for the United States to take action against the UK?
Maybe to be upping the tariffs on the UK?
I would have to go back and look at that. But I think it was
indeed
it was actually worse than just slating.
Yeah, no, indeed. He was looking for the United States to take action against his own country.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think he wants to create problems. I mean, that's what all of this, their reform is inciting all of this unrest and calling people out to kind of yell racist abuse at these hotels because they want to create a problem so they can pretend that they're going to solve it. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, This is kind of what Trump did. I mean, just for example, the last term with his tariffs on farmers, soybean farmers, right? These farmers were losing all of this money because of a Trump-created problem. Mm-hmm. So then Trump took the government's, our tax money and reimbursed the farmers. And so he solved, but he created the problem. Of course, then...
This happens all the time with Trump. He creating a problem that he then has to try but then uses that as, haven't I been wonderful in solving this problem?
And it works because all of these farmers voted for him again.
Yeah.
Even though he's, right, it's all just a big old mess.
Yeah, so that was Nigel. I mean, it was really, and there were quite a few of the Democrats that spoke up. I mean, obviously, had done a huge amount of research. They knew exactly the game that Farage was playing. They knew the context, so they were able to speak into the British context very knowledgeably, which is always nice to see. Mm-hmm. When sometimes you feel like the Americans don't have a Scoobies what goes on in the rest of the world. Yeah. so that was really good to see. I heard somebody, because quite often here in the United Kingdom, when Farage gets pushed, if he's on another, like a news channel, now it's rare that he gets pushed by a journalist. Well,
certainly the BBC is pushing him on us and without holding him to account for the nonsense he spews.
So if he is ever held to account, frequently he just ups and leaves. So he'll get up and walk out. So in some ways, it was good. He didn't do, but then he did actually. He ended up choosing to leave early because he was going to have lunch with the president.
Oh, right. Well,
so
handy that.
Yeah. So that was a whole. So why was he really there? With Farage, it's always about feathering his own nest, or it's how he's going to use the connections he makes to make changes
for his own ambitions.
Yeah. So was this all part of a ploy of being seen by America? I mean, there was that whole thing with with Elon Musk about giving the Reform Party a huge injection of cash.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So whether this was a way of him trying to get more in the limelight for American tech bro
possibly
funders or something like that who are going to.
We don't want them over here. I mean, I think to a certain extent, they're already here. I know it's a scary thing. Yeah. I guess the thing that I would like to know is with the BBC pushing Farage and his, 3 other members of parliament on us, are they going to show this? Are they going to show? Yeah,
I haven't actually seen what's been on there.
From what I've been, I haven't looked on the BBC, but certainly what I was seeing on threads, it doesn't appear to be making the news.
Interesting that. And I think, is it today or tomorrow that they start their Reform Party conference? So it's all happening. The patriarchy is strong in the likes of this charlatan Nigel Farage.
But it was nice to see Jamie Raskin pushing back so knowledgeably and eloquently.
It was indeed.
Balm to the soul.
More of that, and I wish journalists would do that.
Yeah, me too.
Over here, anyway.
Yeah.
All right, enough for today?
I think so. Mm-hmm. Have a good week, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.
Okay, bye, everyone. Bye.